10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And it is a big old triple giant leap for us. We jump into Episode 3, Revenge of the Kerbalcast. As always, I am your LMP, Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin, and with me, my CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Coming up in our program,
We read your messages in this week's crew report. We'll have the latest Kerbal news headlines and another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
You know, I gotta say, I am absolutely bummed.
Well, why is that?
Darth Vader is not a fan.
Oh, no.
No.
I always knew it.
Now, although I will say this, if there is a demographic that it's okay to lose, it would be the Sith, because only two there are, a master and an apprentice. So, you know, we're only down two.
Down two views.
Down two.
That's not bad.
Well, let's go ahead and thank the audience that we actually do have. First of all, I want to thank everybody that has been downloading and listening to the podcast. Thanks to everybody who have written in. We really appreciate the comments. As always, you can get in touch with us. We have an email account, which is
Kerbalpodcast@gmail.com.
And thanks to Nostromo, we now have our very own Twitter feed.
All right, yeah, we have a Twitter now. It's @Kerbalcast, so you can reach us there if you have any questions or anything that you'd like seen on the show. You can go ahead and message us through there. You can follow us for any news updates, and sometimes we post articles that we reference during the show.
That's right. And also, I would like to thank the moderators on the Kerbal subreddit. They have put a permanent link to this podcast on their front page, which I thought was really nice. And also thanks to Squad. They've been helping to promote us as well.
Yeah, they've been great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to also say thanks to our global audience. We are literally being heard around the world, which is kind of hard for me to believe, but thank you to everybody worldwide who listens.
Yeah, I think we're in most of the continents now.
Most of them. You know what I was thinking? You know that really idiotic thing that people do when they're talking to somebody that they think doesn't speak the same language? They talk really loud and really slow.
Yeah.
We should do a segment, and we should call it, like, Global Offensive, where we talk really loud and really slow and just offend, 90% of the planet.
Just every night, just try to throw in references to, things we don't really get.
There you go.
How was that running of the bulls?
There you go. Another shrimp on the Barbie. See, we just lost Australia.
Yeah.
They just turned out. But we're still strong in New Zealand.
Yeah. New Zealand's going great.
Well, okay. As we talk about at the beginning of every podcast, I've been playing the game about a year. You are getting close to your first month now.
Yeah.
What is your progress?
I am now 15 hours in. So in those 15 hours, it was just 5 new hours this week. I've started the campaign mode since the last episode. Mm-hmm. And in that time, I've unlocked quite a bit of science. The new thing I'm working on now is getting all the science I didn't know was available before.
Right.
Because, whenever you first get on the launch pad and you go EVA and get a soil sample from the launch pad of, all the ashes of all the other, little Kerbins that have died there. So
the memorial launch pad.
So after you get your pile of dog tags and, you collect soil samples, so I started launching myself around the planet and just getting those, like, nickel and dime pieces of science.
Right.
And I also got the science pod now, so I'm shooting things out there. From the interview that we had in Episode 2, I actually took some of the knowledge from that to help myself get successful orbits. And I've broken orbit. So, Jebediah, I'm sorry. He is stuck somewhere orbiting Kerbin. Bill, I'm sorry too. He's somewhere around the sun working on his tan. But yeah,
and Bob is in the locker room having a panic attack.
Yeah,
he's next.
Yeah, he's next on the list.
Now, when you said you broke orbit, do you mean that you left the Kerbin system and you went into solar orbit?
Yeah. For Bill, I did. For
Bill.
For Jebediah, I just had a successful orbit around Kerbin. For Bill, I was around Kerbin, and I broke off from that. And in the fast time warp, he was zipping all over the place, and then he settled for orbiting the sun.
Gotcha. Okay. He settled.
I made it.
That's a polite way to put stranded.
I made him a great offer, and he decided to, got to get a timeshare orbiting.
It's like,
the sun.
Hey, all the tang you can drink.
Yeah.
Well, have you been using, now that I mentioned it last time, have you been using the F5 quick save and the F9 quick load?
Somewhat. Most of them, I've been reverting more than anything else, because by the time I know I should save, something's already gone wrong. It's building up. You got to build up a habit of it,
right?
And I haven't gotten that habit yet. So once something goes wrong, I'm like, oh well, revert, because I haven't gotten that far. See, if I was a couple planets away and I was about to land on something, I'd be like, I need to save this. I need to save this. I don't think I have everything lined up correctly to where I know that if I save now, the next few steps are going to go successful anyway. Okay. So I'm just crash and burn it. So
I learned something about F5 that I never knew last week. I was 2 science points away from unlocking something that I really wanted. Okay.
What was that?
You remember I had mentioned I wanted the docking hatches?
Yeah.
Well, it's like a lot of tech trees where you have to unlock other things first before you can get to the things that you want.
Uh-huh.
And I was literally 2 science points short.
Oh.
So what I needed to do was just a quick little hop mission to get some kind of science. And I thought to myself, because by this point I had the thermometer on my capsule. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a short hop and I'm going to land on one of the polar ice caps. And I'm going to take a temperature reading. And that I'll probably get 5 science points, whatever.
But that's what you need.
Right. Well, as I'm descending through the atmosphere coming down to the polar caps, I fired off my parachutes and I went ahead and took a temperature reading and I got a science, I think it was 4.6 or whatever. Uh-huh. But I thought, a question occurred to me, will I get more science if I'm on the ground or will I get more science if I'm above it? Oh. So I F5'd. Okay. I landed, I took another temperature reading, and then I only got like 2 science. And I said, okay, well, obviously I get more science if I'm descending. So I hit F9 and reloaded. That's when I discover that if you F5 after you've blown your parachutes, when it reloads, you have no parachutes.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was like reload, splat.
Man.
And I thought, my first thought was, I thought, okay, well, that's a glitch. So I hit F9 again, splat. And I kept, like F9, splat, F9, splat. And so I finally had to redo the entire mission.
I ran into a weird issue the other day where the pod had landed. It just landed. I didn't have any landing gear or anything. It just parachuted down. And it fell over. And I hit while I was hitting the EVA button, and the screen just went dark.
Really?
Like it's like he went into the earth, and he didn't see any point in getting out of it, because honestly, it's like an ostrich response thing. Yeah. Stick your head in the sand, and that's all safe. Well,
see, what happened is you stumbled across a later update to the game. I think it's 0.26, where they actually add an underground level.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you slam into the surface of Kerbin just hard enough, you get to that secret underground level.
I didn't have the science for flashlights, though. That's probably what got me.
And also, you need the science for shovels, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think they probably have shovels from all the graves that I've,
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. If not morbid, but true. But yeah, that's if you don't know this already, and I'm probably the last person on the planet who didn't know this, but don't F5 after you've blown your parachutes, because when you reload... Because you know how when you land after you've popped your parachutes, when you land, the parachutes immediately disappear? I think what the game does is once you've actually fired your parachutes, I think the game reads it as they're no longer part of the game. I mean, they're no longer part of what you're doing.
Yeah, the staging or whatever has already been used.
And so if you reload, if you quick save after you've popped your parachutes and then reload, I think the game says... He's already done his parachutes, so I'm not going to recreate them. And then, of course, that's when you go splat.
If you were to save halfway through using a booster and then reload, would it still be using the booster?
That's a good question. Hey, squad, did you hear that? Or anybody else in the audience?
Like the moment we go home, we're going to try it. I'm like, oh, okay, there's the answer.
Yeah.
And then multiple forums post like, man, these guys don't know that.
Yeah, there are some things that once you fire them, you don't get them back.
Yeah.
So I know parachutes are one. So
whenever I fired Jebediah into the sun, I didn't get him back.
you fired him into the sun. Poor Jebediah.
That was a severance package. Right
Poor
there.
Jebediah. You know, another thing I learned, by the way, I had one of those lunar landings. If I ever tried to do this again, I guarantee you I never would. It was just one of those freak occurrences. I told you that I restarted career mode for about the 400th time.
Yeah.
I decided to get a real jump on my tech tree. I was going to do this kind of go for broke, Hail Mary mission to the moon. Okay?
Okay.
I had unlocked just enough parts to where I could build more or less a lunar lander. And I was coming down. I had deorbited over the moon. I was coming down, okay, and I had fumes in my tanks. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I'm talking my descent stage, not my ascent, because my ascent stage did not have landing legs. So I couldn't, there was no way I could revert to my ascent stage and still land. So I had to ride the descent stage down. So I'm coming down. I've got very little fuel in the tanks. So I decide I'm going to roll the dice, and I'm coming down. I'm going like 300 meters per second or more. I'm coming down, and I wait until I get to just the last second, and I do a full throttle burn. And I dropped my speed all the way down to about 5 meters per second.
Oh, nice.
Which is perfect.
Yeah.
Right? Well, here's the problem. I still had a little bit of distance before I touched down. And I was still moving. I had some horizontal movement. So I angled the craft to try and null out that horizontal movement. Ran out of fuel.
Oh.
And since I had just a little bit of distance to fall, my speed immediately starts picking up. I hit the ground at about 16 meters per second. The craft surprisingly held together, which I did not expect.
Yeah.
Bounces up. Okay. Your craft bounces, apparently. My craft bounces up while I'm in that short little arc starting to come back down again. I immediately tilt the craft again into the direction of my momentum, hit the ground again. It still holds together. I bounce up, okay, and then I come in for a third bounce. And the craft is still holding together this whole time. And every time I hit, it slows me down just a little bit more. My third bounce, I actually landed and stayed down, but I had just enough momentum where it was trying to topple me over. So I started using my WASD keys, and I'm not kidding, I actually walked my craft on 2 landing legs until I killed the momentum.
You're shimmying.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, how low can you go?
Yeah.
And I finally brought it to a complete halt, and the only damage to my craft was one of the landing pads broke. Not the landing strut, the landing pad. So I did land. I was just at a little bit of an angle.
Oh.
But I had my science package and my mystery goo and my temperature, my thermometer. So I got a whole bunch of science, and I came back but I was just, the whole time I was thinking, if I tried to do a 16 meter per second landing, my spacecraft would explode on impact.
Yeah.
That's one of those it'll never happen again kind of things. You know, it's like fishermen, they always have that giant fish that got away.
Yeah, like perfect storm kind of thing.
Yeah, this is the perfect storm landing that actually survived.
See, I just recently got the unmanned pod, so as I've been orbiting, the thing I've learned now is, fuel is very important, and I'm sort of learning how much fuel and how much thrust I need in order to get the size of craft I'm sending up. Now it's electricity.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I'm like, how come I can't steer? I can't.
Yeah.
I'm out of electricity. How come I can't
Have you unlocked solar panels or batteries?
No, I unlocked batteries, so now I just cover the thing in batteries.
Okay.
But I'm trying to get enough science for solar panels, because if I can do that, I can at least make a satellite that can orbit.
Check, I'm not 100% sure about this, but check, I think when you unlock the smallest battery, which is 200 volts or millivolts or whatever it is, I believe that it unlocks a single solar panel, which you can actually, you can layer those things all up and down your spacecraft. And that will, and also your engines, some of the engines actually generate electricity.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Those are
So-
a couple of things to think about.
Just to reiterate, I'm very new at this.
Well, I've been at it for a year, and apparently I'm still learning things. Like, don't F5 when your parachutes are gone. Let's go ahead and get to our crew report now. This is messages that people have sent in to us. Like I said, a lot of folks have been writing in, and we've been getting a lot of really positive responses, and it's been great. The first one that I want to pick up from, Orbitus2 wrote and asked us, what is your opinion on Elon Musk and SpaceX? Do you think his claim to be able to get a man on Mars in 10 years is feasible? Now, for those of you who don't know, Elon Musk was born in South Africa. He is Canadian-American. He is co-founder of PayPal, Tesla Motors, and SpaceX. In 2011, Musk said that he wanted to send humans to Mars within 10 to 20 years. And Orbitus2 asks what our opinion is of this. I hope it's true. Because I firmly believe that if the private industry is going to put us on Mars, it's going to be because of people like this. You have these individuals that almost through sheer force of will can make things happen. And the fact that he has been involved with PayPal and Tesla Motors, he's got good instincts. And while I was doing some reading on this, I came across a TED Talk that he gave in 2013.
The thing about rockets is that they're all expendable. All rockets that fly today are fully expendable. The space shuttle was an attempt at a reusable rocket, but even the main tank of the space shuttle was thrown away every time. And the parts that were reusable took a 10,000-person group 9 months to refurbish for flight. So the space shuttle ended up costing $1 billion per flight. It's important that the rocket stages be able to come back, to be able to return to the launch site and be ready to launch again within a matter of hours. What a lot of people don't realize is the cost of the fuel, of the propellant, is very small. It's much like on a jet. So the cost of the propellant is about 0.3% of the cost of the rocket. So it's possible to achieve, let's say, roughly 100-fold improvement in the cost of spaceflight if you can effectively reuse the rocket. That's why it's so important. Every mode of transport that we use, whether it's planes, trains, automobiles, bikes, horses, is reusable, but not rockets. So we must solve this problem in order to become a spacefaring civilization.
Now, the reason that I chose that soundbite is that he is on the right track right there. Space flight is very expensive. And if we're ever going to get to Mars, we're talking about an investment of billions of dollars, and it's way beyond what one person can do. If he can attract enough investors, and if he can make it inexpensive enough to where it is feasible to go to Mars, I can see it happening.
I would say with it being done by the private sector, they have maybe less red tape and definitely more funding.
Right.
So they're able to get it from a lot more sources instead of, slapping Pizza Hut's logo on the side of a government rocket. And it also raises the question, you can save probably about half the money you spend if you don't come back.
Right.
You just make it a one-way trip, and that's it.
Well, I saw somewhere they said that they asked how many people would be willing to go to Mars if it was only a one-way trip, and the percentage was very high.
Yeah, they were looking at people. They started doing open screenings, and they would look at you, see if you qualified, and you're applying to be in a rocketry program, so there's probably a lot to the application process.
Well, one point that I would make: the private sector is not going to go to Mars just because it's the scientific exploration, it's the spirit of discovery and it's the right thing to do and whatever. They're going to do it to make a profit. You've got several challenges. Number one, make it less expensive, which is what they're working on, and that's good. There are environmental challenges they're going to have to deal with. But then there's the other challenge, which is how are you going to make this profitable? And if you don't have that profit motive, you're going to have a problem with funding, because people are not going to kick in billions of dollars if they're not going to see that return to them at least, tenfold or whatever. That's my thoughts on it. So anyway, hopefully Orbitus2, we have answered your question.
The next question comes from John Martin. Is using a tool like MechJeb, which is a mod which can maneuver for you, cheating, or does it make the game more accessible to players who want an easier game? Okay, here's my perspective on cheating. It depends on if anyone is being affected by it and who's being affected. If it's just a single-player game and you're playing by yourself, the only person you can cheat is yourself. So if you're cheating yourself out of an experience, then yeah, that's cheating, but it's only on what you want out of it. So if you want to get rid of some of the more technical parts of it and make it easier so you can enjoy the other parts you like more, you're not cheating. If it's a multiplayer game, say in Call of Duty or anything where you're using like automatic aiming or, any of the multiple cheats and hacks they have, then you're cheating because you're not cheating yourself, you're cheating somebody else out of the experience. So when multiplayer comes along, it may be considered cheating to do something they can't do by using a mod, and it's only really bad now if you were to show that you did something on YouTube or in a forum. I think it's the most decent thing you can do to list what mods you had, because to show that you managed to get to the moon on nothing but, science pods, there's obviously something up. But
Look, Ma, no engines.
Yeah, so if you manage to do anything and you post about it, I think it's courteous to list your mods and to let everyone know what mods you had in case they want to use them as well, and so they know what you were working with. Should you feel bad for using a lot of them? No, because the game is about having fun and you're having the fun you want to have.
I don't know if you remember this or not. You and I have had this conversation before, not about Kerbal and not about MechJeb, but you and I have talked about cheating in the games because we have run into a lot of people that have a very strict mentality of you play every game on the hardest difficulty, you don't use cheats, you don't use strategy guides, you don't look online for anything. My opinion has always been, and it's very similar to yours, my opinion is it's your game. You play it the way you want to. The only time I draw the line is like you said, if you can cheat and get an achievement, then no, that's not right. If you are in multiplayer and you've got an advantage over another player, no, that is not right. But I will say MechJeb, in its defense, because I have it, I put it on my craft. I don't use it as an automation system, but the reason I put it on there is the instrumentation in the game is very bare bones. And I'm talking the plain Jane vanilla version of the game. The instrumentation, your control panel, is very plain. And for example, if you want to get a lot of science, you need to visit as many biomes as possible. Well, the vanilla game does not tell you what the different biomes are until you land on them and conduct a science experiment. And then it'll tell you, you're in the Mun Highlands or you're in the Mun whatever. With MechJeb, you can use the automated landing feature where you select a landing spot and it will tell you what the biome is. And you can do this without engaging the automation. So I use MechJeb as a way of gaining more information within the game because you can get a lot of information out of MechJeb. The other thing about MechJeb that I don't like is it took me a long time to learn how to rendezvous and dock. And I've gotten to where I'm pretty good at it now. If I ever tell MechJeb to automatically rendezvous and dock with something, it inevitably takes longer to do it and does more complicated maneuvering to get it done than I do. I can usually rendezvous and dock within a few orbits. MechJeb tends to take several orbits, and it tends to do a lot of corrective burns and a lot of maneuvering before it gets me there. So that's part of why I don't use MechJeb. But again, to answer the question, it's your game. You play it the way you want, as long as you don't affect anyone else.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're going to post a picture of you doing anything, do any sort of screen capping, list your mods, because it'll also help anyone who's doing that same thing find those mods. And if they're trying to do it and they don't see what mods you're doing, they may not know what they're doing wrong. So it helps them in the game for you to be honest about what you're doing.
Yeah, I like the mods that I like the best. There's one called Kerbal Engineering. The mods that I like the best are the ones that give me more information. And another thing I will say about MechJeb, every space program has used some form of automation. Even the earliest Mercury flights. Do you know how when the Mercury flights would lift off and they'd say lift off and the clock is running? What they were talking about, the craft actually had a little wind-up clock that, as it unwound, would trigger certain events. And so when the Mercury spacecraft launched, the astronaut, one of the first things they did was they'd reach over and they'd start the clock. And so that's where that comes from. Lift off and the clock is started.
Yeah.
Obviously, that became computerized as you got into later missions. So I use MechJeb to me. I use it as an assistant to what I'm doing, and that's I'm using it in the same spirit that it has been used in the past. Now, we have one more message in our crew report today, and this came from Zepsilon, and I love that username. I posted a new set of questions on Reddit, and Zepsilon answered them. And I'm gonna read the first question and answer, and then Nas, I want you to pick up and do the next one, okay? Zepsilon, I asked, have you done the asteroid mission? And he said, quote, I have done the asteroid mission, and I have also retrieved an asteroid in my career save. I landed it, but lost the ship in doing so. It seems as if asteroids are indestructible.
Next question was, are you excited about multiplayer? In all caps, yes, I am excited.
Yes, I'm excited!
I've played a bit
I'm excited!
I've played a bit with KMP in the past, and it was really fun. I think it really adds to the whole space program simulator, because in real life there's more than one space program, so now there will be competition, as well as opportunity for friends to work together in missions, and also have space races. I can't wait for it to come out. Me, personally, I can't wait to make space planes and reenact Top Gun with my friends.
So would that be Kerbals with their shirts off playing volleyball?
Always.
Now, our last item that we have for a crew report today, this goes back to a conversation that you and I had.
In episode 2.
Was it episode 2?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't remember. They're all blurring together now. We had a discussion about, if you're a novice to Kerbal Space Program, is it better to start Sandbox or Career? And I came across on the Kerbal forums on their website, that actually has been a topic. And they did a poll questionnaire, Sandbox or Career.
They had 364 votes at the point that we grabbed the survey. The Career was at 45%, Sandbox 31%, and then votes for they're both good as each other, 24%. Now, from the thread, we have a few quotes from Will Hop. I like Career because it gives me the opportunity to design missions in a way I wouldn't previously have done. And from Pecan, Sandbox, because Career is just about unlocking parts so you can eventually be back in the sandbox. That's it for the crew report. Now let's go to news.
Our first news item comes to us from NASA, and it says, NASA has given a green light to a group of citizen scientists attempting to breathe new scientific life into a more than 35-year-old agency spacecraft. They will attempt to contact and possibly command and control NASA's International Sun-Earth Explorer 3, also known as IC-3. It was launched in 1978 to study the constant flow of solar winds streaming towards Earth. What they would like to do, if they can establish contact, is they would like to put the spacecraft into an orbit at a gravitationally stable point between Earth and the Sun, which is known as L1, or Lagrangian 1. Then, once safely back in orbit, the next step would be to return the spacecraft to operations and use the instruments as they were originally designed. If communications are unsuccessful, the spacecraft will simply swing by the moon and continue to orbit the sun. NASA has shared technical data with the citizen scientists to help them communicate with and hopefully return data from IC-3.
In other news, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter will celebrate 5 years in orbit June 18th. To celebrate the anniversary and LRO's many scientific contributions, NASA invites the public to select a favorite orbiter image of the moon for the cover of a special image collection called The Moon as Art. Voting ends June 6th. You can go to their website, nasa.gov. On the front page, you'll find a link for Moon as Art.
And that does it for news, and you know what that means. And now, another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Honey, I'm home.
Hello, dear. How was your day?
Oh, same as always. My ship broke apart in the atmosphere and I plummeted to my death. Say, is that spaghetti I smell?
Tune in next time for another edition of As the Curtain Turns.
Oh, bravo, bravo. Another great episode.
Another great one. Better than the last, which is not hard to do.
Okay, for our next segment, it is But I Digress, where we deviate some from the mission plan of Kerbal Space Program and talk about other topics.
And this one might rightly be called But I Apologize, because this might actually get a little bit long-winded. We're going to talk about The Right Stuff, which is one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite books. Now, Nostromo has not seen The Right Stuff.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
But I have loaned him my Blu-ray copy. He's going to watch it, and next week we're going to talk about the movie. But this week, there's one part of that movie that I want to talk about. This is something that has bothered me for quite some time. And I think fans of The Right Stuff and fans of the space program probably know what I'm talking about. It's how the movie and how the book depicts Gus Grissom. Gus Grissom flew the second suborbital mission. The first was Alan Shepard. Second was Gus Grissom. And then the third was John Glenn, and he flew the first American orbital missions, okay? Gus Grissom, his flight went fine. Splashdown went fine. While he was sitting there waiting for the helicopter to hook onto his capsule, his hatch blew. It was loaded with explosive bolts, and the hatch blew, and the capsule sank. Now, the movie portrays it as Gus Grissom was panicking, and he blew the hatch by accident, or however you want to put it. But the book and the movie both portray Gus Grissom as panicked and at fault for blowing the hatch. Now, if you look at the historical record, that's not true. The movie is beholden to the book. So obviously they kind of went to that source material. But what I wanted to do here is I wanted to kind of walk through the difference between the movie and the real life. And I'm going to start with, these are mission recordings of Gus Grissom's flight. And you do not hear the sound of somebody panicking. Okay? I'm going to do the real life missions, and then I'm going to do bits from the movie. This is Gus Grissom on takeoff, and the name of his spacecraft was Liberty Bell 7.
Ignition. Liftoff. Roger, this is Liberty Bell 7. The clock is operating.
All right, so this is the part where Gus Grissom begins his reentry, and this is where you can hear what the effects of the G-force is building up. It's like having an elephant sit on your stomach.
Okay, the G's are starting to build. Roger. G's are building. We're up to 6. There's 9. There's about 10. And the handle is off from under it. There I got a little pitch rate coming back down to 7. Okay, the altimeter is actually about 65. There's 60. Okay, I'm getting some contrails, evidently a shock wave. 50,000 feet, I'm feeling good. Feeling very good. Everything is fine. 45,000, do you still read?
Okay, I'm going to ask you at this point, does that sound like somebody who's panicking?
No, that sounds like somebody who's like competently handling,
right,
what they're doing.
Last clip I'm going to play from Gus Grissom. This is Liberty Bell 7 has hit the water. He is floating there, waiting for the helicopter to come and latch on. He is going through his checklist. Now, because he's actually in the water, there's a lot more interference and the sound quality goes down considerably. But this is Gus Grissom in Liberty Bell 7 before the hatch blows. He's in the water and he's communicating. You can also hear the helicopter. He's communicating with the helicopter.
I want you to give me how much longer will it be before you get here? This is the point. We're in orbit now this time. Around the Roger, give me about another 5 minutes here to mark these switch positions before I give you a call to come in and hook on. Are you ready to come in and hook on anytime? Since Club 1, right there, we're ready anytime you are. Okay, give me about another 3 or 4 minutes here to finish these switch positions, and I'll be ready for you.
It's kind of hard to hear what he just said there, but he's saying that he's going to mark all the switch positions, and what he's talking about is he's got a checklist and a grease pencil, and he's going to go down the checklist and mark all the switch positions. And when they found the craft on the ocean floor years later, they actually found that checklist, and he was, I don't know if I'd say halfway through it, but he was working his way through it when the hatch blew. Now, again, does that sound like somebody who's panicking?
No, I think in a state of panic, I probably would have eaten the grease pencil.
There you go. Now, this is the movie's version of it. And I have the movie doesn't actually show the suborbital hop. What they show, they pick it up with the landing. Listen to the panic in this man's voice.
Are you ready to come in and hook on any time?
This is Hut 1, Roger. Hut 1. Just waiting for your okay to come in and hook on. Over.
If you're ready for me to blow the hatch, I'll have to take my helmet off.
Say again, Liberty Bell. Just waiting for your okay to come in and hook on. Liberty Bell, say again. This is Hut 1, waiting for your okay.
Okay, now that was audio from the movie, The Right Stuff. Fred Ward was playing Gus Grissom, and as you can hear, he's very panicky, and he's basically begging the helicopter to come hook on. And you can see that you know he's sweating, his eyes are red, full-blown panic, and the movie gives you the impression that he blows the hatch. The way the movie sums it up, Gus Grissom saying that the explosive hatch just blew. When he leaves the room, there is an unnamed accident investigator who says this.
Explosive hatches have been on jet fighters for 10 years. The damn things have been wrung inside out, subjected to trial by heat, by water, by shaking, pounding. We even dropped them from a height of 100 feet onto concrete, and not one of them has ever just blown.
After that, the book goes on to say, but far from having a tarnished record, Grissom was a hero. He was back solidly in the rotation for whatever great flights might come up in the future, as if by magic. Now, what the book does not mention at this point is Gus Grissom, NASA did an investigation, and they cleared him. Now, here's where I give the movie credit that I don't give the book. The book portrays Chuck Yeager and the other test pilots, the true brethren, as being very dismissive of Gus Grissom. He blew it, and he got away with it. The movie actually adds a scene that's not in the book. This is Chuck Yeager talking to the true brethren.
You think a monkey knows he's sitting on top of a rocket that might explode? These astronaut boys, they know that, see? I'll tell you something. It takes a special kind of man to volunteer for a suicide mission, especially when it's on TV. Oh, Gus, he did all right.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox. I've vented my spleen. That is my gripe, and now you're going to get to watch The Right Stuff for the first time.
Now with a whole new perspective on it.
Your very own commentary track.
So I'm going to watch it with somebody and say all these things, and they're like, man, he knows so much.
You know, actually what they're going to say, and I've had this problem, they're going to say, man, is he an obnoxious know-it-all? Well, I guess, does that wrap it up for But I Digress?
That does.
Okay. Well, that also wraps it up for our program as well. We want to leave you this time with something that we didn't do the last couple of times, but we would like to make this a regular feature, and that is we want to leave you with a question. And we would love it if you would answer the question either by email or Twitter or whatever. And the question is,
what do you think the background story is for Kerbal Space Program?
Now explain that.
Now, it begs the question, who are the Kerbals, how did they get there, and why are they trying to go into space? So, any story on how it all came to be, how come there aren't any Kerbal cities, there's just a space program? How did it all come about? Which came first, the Kerbal or the mini explosions afterward?
The Kerbal or the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Didn't you have a theory?
Well, it was a theory that I'd read from a poster on the Something Awful Kerbal Space Program.
Okay.
And their theory was that the Kerbals were actually a sentient AI that was on a generational ship. and all the inhabitants of it died when it crashed on the planet. So the sentient AI, without anyone to guide it, they just started building rockets. And anytime they grab something from the junkyard, they're actually grabbing it from a crash site.
Okay. Well, we would love to hear an answer to that question. The question, once again, is what do you think the backstory is for Kerbal Space Program? And we'd love to hear some very creative answers, and we'll pick some of the best ones, and we'll read those on our future podcasts.
And that wraps it up for Kerbalcast. You can reach us at email, kerbalpodcast@gmail.com, our Twitter, @Kerbalcast, and you can subscribe to us through iTunes. We wanted to give a thanks to all of our audience all around the world, the subreddit moderators, Squad, and the out music is by Professor Soap. You can reach him at facebook.com/Professor Soap.
And once again, I am your LMP, Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, my Command Module Pilot, my CMP,
Nostromo.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of Kerbalcast, and we'll see you again next time. How was your day, dear?
Oh, same as always. My spacecraft broke apart in the atmosphere, and I'm redoing it. I reverted, and everything was fine.
Our first outtake.
Oh, same as always. My spacecraft... I think this will have more outtakes than any other part.
How was your day, dear?
Oh, same as always. My spacecraft broke apart in the atmosphere.
For those of you who don't know, Elon Musk was born in I almost said San Francisco. South Africa.
San Jose.
Do you know the way to Johannesburg?
I sure hope he knows.
Yeah, that's the theme song to District 10, by the way. I think this is going well, don't you?
Yeah.
Coming up in today's program,
We're
just speaking in vowels now.
Man.
Nostromo's having a vowel movement. I promise we're not drinking.